Hi Donna, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very good, very good.
Do you want to start us off by introducing yourself today?
Absolutely. So, hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name's Donna Hughes. I'm founder of Launch Negotiation, and I am absolutely passionate about showing you how you can use negotiation in your life.
So yes, Donna, thank you so much for joining us today. We're glad to have you on TEDx today. Um,
Oh, I'm delighted to be here.
so could you start by telling us what exactly negotiation is?
Absolutely. So I think one of the common misconceptions is that negotiation only applies to the business world.
Hmm.
But in reality, negotiation is nearly every single conversation we're having. So what I encourage people to do is think of negotiation as just a conversation aimed at reaching an agreement. And that could be, a multitude of different conversations you're having every day, whether it's what Netflix series you're going to watch next, whether it's who has control over the remote to be able to choose which Netflix series you watch next. A lot of our daily conversations are actually negotiations, and when you can start to see life as negotiable, then you can recognize all the opportunities you have to negotiate in your day-to-day life.
Oh wow, so that's great because yeah, I keep fighting with my sister a lot about the remote too. Then negotiation is gonna be the way I go from now on. So yeah.
Exactly.
Um, so why is it important for us to recognize negotiation as a key part of our everyday lives?
In a nutshell, you don't get what you don't ask for. And so the reason I really encourage it as a daily habit, as a lifestyle, and viewing life as negotiable is if you think about all these conversations you're having, and some of them are really high stakes, such as salary negotiations, but some of them might just be watching that Netflix series, like we mentioned. If you take the time to advocate for yourself and ask for actually what you want, then that compounds over the course of your lifetime. And when we just took a look at salary negotiations, those that don't negotiate their salary typically forfeit over $1 million over the course of their career. So it's got huge implications there. But then when you think about your own personal life, and if you're sharing a house with someone, that contributes to your work life balance and how happy you are in your lifestyle. So it's about, again, recognizing what your wants are and communicating those, and also reaching a resolution with the person on the other side of the table, or sofa in that case.
Right, yeah, wow. So how does launch negotiation actually help their, I guess, viewer or their customers or clients in a way to do this?
I think one of the main things that we do is we address the root cause of why people don't see themselves as negotiators.
Okay.
So there's quite a outdated view in the media of what negotiator looks like. So typically it's someone that's very aggressive. Usually they've got the shoulder pads on and the power suits and the
Mhm.
power pose. And there's nothing wrong with that impression of a negotiator. It's just that for a lot of people, they can't relate to that image.
Right.
And so what we do is we really challenge the existing stereotype and show that everyone can be a negotiator, whether you're 3 years old
Mhm.
or you're 100 years old. There's opportunities to negotiate in your life. So one of the things we've recently done is we launched a campaign called This Is What a Negotiator Looks Like. And we are showcasing amazing women from all over the world, from scientists to entrepreneurs, from authors to artists,
Mhm.
and really showcasing how they're using negotiation in their life. And again, breaking it down to these everyday conversations that we're having that we might not see as negotiations, but in
Mhm.
essence, they really are.
Wow, that's awesome. So is this going to be like a sorry, when is this the workshop? Is it going to be like a workshop where people can like sign up and just come and view the workshop and learn?
Great question. So a combination of two. So we've got the This Is What a Negotiator Looks Like. That's a campaign on Instagram. So every Wednesday we're just showcasing a different woman from around the world and her story. And as I said, that's scientists to pharmacists, you name it. It's women from all around the world sharing their experience in negotiation.
Hmm.
In terms of our workshops, we regularly have public ones available. So there's a lot of them listed on my website, which is launchnegotiation.com, which again talk through the nitty gritty of kind of salary negotiations and how you can really prepare for that job interview or prepare for that salary conversation.
Hmm. So, going back to the fact that like for your series, like how to become a negotiator or like look at it from a negotiator's perspective. So,
Yeah.
does launch negotiation focus on I guess more of women trying to like empower them in a way to like negotiate them, or is it just all types of people or like both genders, I guess?
Definitely. I mean, the workshops are open to everyone and anyone, but I think a pure focus for me is very much on women, because quite often I find a lot of women don't see themselves as negotiators,
Hmm.
specifically in the context of negotiating for themselves.
Okay.
So from a very young age, obviously, we know women are socialized very differently to men. And for girls, we're typically socialized into more communal roles, which means we feel very, very comfortable negotiating and advocating for other people, such as our team or our family or our friends, because that fits with the communal role. But when it comes to negotiating for ourselves, to asking for what we deserve, we feel much less comfortable. Where research shows we're much less assertive when we're negotiating on behalf of ourselves. Conversely, when it comes to guys, they're typically socialized into these more agentic roles where they feel very comfortable advocating for themselves. You know, there's themes of honest overconfidence that come through. And so, you know, that's something that I do address in the workshops, which is, as leaders, regardless of what age you are and what type of leadership role you're holding in your community, it's important that you recognize that competence does not necessarily correlate with confidence, and the person that maybe puts themselves forward for those opportunities might not be necessarily the most competent, and likewise someone that doesn't put themselves forward might be the most competent but just might lack that self-belief. So it's about recognizing how you're distributing those promotion opportunities, those development opportunities, and making sure that you're recognizing just because someone doesn't speak up, it doesn't mean that they're not capable of performing that role.
Right. Wow, that's really insightful, because I know that, like, you know, just as a young woman, I have a lot of friends and like high schoolers, college friends, also college students who actually just get into the negotiating world only in a corporate sense. So
Yeah.
as an everyday life instance, which I think you really like opened up my eyes on. So thank you for that. Yeah. Um,
So
So one of the questions I had for you was, so for young people like me, like high schoolers and college students,
mhm.
how do we start? What is your advice on how we start, I guess, seeing ourselves as negotiators, or rather even nitpicking on opportunities where we can negotiate?
Absolutely. So I'd say you're never too early to start negotiating. Even if you haven't got that first job yet, it's still time to think and harness those skills that you can use to negotiate at a later stage.
Hmm.
So a lot of the skills that I really emphasize are ones that we can practice every single day. But even though they're relatively simple, it doesn't mean they're easy. So skills like active listening, where instead of listening to someone and planning what you're going to say back to them in response,
Hmm.
I mean, absolutely immersing yourself in the conversation, watching their body language, taking account of their verbal and non-verbal communication, and really thinking about, is the message that they're saying reflected in how they're moving their body, and you know how the tone of voice they're using. So active listening is a huge one, and every relationship that you have, whether it's with your sibling or whether it's with your
Hmm.
parent or a partner or a leader, every relationship that you have can benefit from active listening, because you're showing the person that you care about their opinion. You're showing them that you're listening to them and you really care about how they feel. And that's one of the greatest things you can have in terms of influence on someone, is when you take the time to understand their perspective,
Hmm.
then you can really construct the most persuasive and influential counter proposal towards them. So active listening is a huge one you can practice every day. I'd
Hmm.
also say, you know, generally emotional intelligence, broadly speaking, thinking about how you're entering conversations and adjusting your behavior depending on how they respond, and making sure you're in tune with what's going on, what they're saying, and how they're behaving.
Okay.
In terms of, you know, daily examples, you don't have to practice in these high stake conversations. You can start practicing right now.
Right.
So, you know, it's around dinner time now. You could start a negotiation now in terms of, you know, what are we having for dinner? We could have this, or we could have this other item. It could be a conversation, you know, if you're doing any school projects or anything like that. It could be an extension on a deadline. It could be what type of resources that you're using in that project. It could even be, if you're doing a group project, what roles each member of the team is having in that project. Again, these, you know, relatively basic conversations are really good practice ground. And it means that when you practice on a daily basis, when you prime your mind to see all these conversations as opportunities for collaboration, opportunities to increase your influence and persuasion skills,
Hmm.
then when you go for these really high stakes conversations, the salary negotiations, the house negotiations, you
Hmm.
have that confidence because you realize you've been practicing for the last 5, 10 years in doing so. And you know, the reason I really emphasize there's no time too soon to start is straight out of university, a gender pay gap arises of 8%. And a significant proportion of that is attributed to the fact that men are 4 times more likely to negotiate their salary than women. So even if you feel going into your very first job, I don't mind if it's a paper round, if it's babysitting, whatever that role is,
Hmm.
you probably have more ability to negotiate than you realize. And even if it's a very small win, that can improve your confidence for these really high stakes conversations you're going to be having a few years down the line.
Wow. Yeah, no, I actually didn't know about the gender. I just knew that there was a gender pay gap. I just never did like women just by talking and talking, actively, like in terms of, just listening and just simple skills, conversational skills can actually increase this or actually, fill up the gap of the 8%. So that's really new information to me. Yeah.
And the reason I'm so passionate about it, Adad, is
Hmm.
not because I've negotiated all my life. It's because I didn't negotiate when I came out from university, and so it's so important to me to pass this message on, saying you can negotiate, and
Right.
even if they can't give you a pay rise at that stage, you've
Hmm.
paved the foundation for when you blow their socks off later down the line, and you do a fantastic job in that organization.
Hmm.
They know that salary is important to you. They know that they're going to have that conversation with you if they're
Hmm.
going to retain you. And one thing I would add is often when we leave university or when we go into roles where there's a significant change in responsibilities. So, say if you're working part time while studying and then you went to a full time career role,
Right.
often when we're asked about our salary expectations, we anchor on our existing salary.
Right.
So we'll say, well, I'm thinking around this level because that's what I'm currently earning. The
Hmm.
dangers behind that is the new role that you're going for has significantly more responsibility. And so your existing salary bears no relation to the new salary you should be targeting.
Hmm.
And so, that's the biggest thing I'd probably say when you're at the age that you are, when you're going to new positions and each role you're getting is having considerably more responsibility. That's something you should really think about. What is a competitive rate in the market for this role? Don't base upon what your existing salary is because it's likely you're comparing apples and pears in terms of the two roles.
Hmm. So yeah, no, that's something I'm gonna keep in mind in the future, definitely. So I'm just wondering, so like you mentioned that there's a like kind of a stigma around women that kind of never actually either don't know that they can negotiate or they're afraid to in a way that they're gonna seem strong and aggressive to the other party. So why do you think this stigma exists, and how can we like young women or just women in general can reduce this or remove the stigma altogether?
Fantastic question. So, definitely in terms of stigma, it does exist. The way women are perceived when they negotiate is very different from the way that men are perceived when they negotiate. So, that is research driven. But I would say that, it stems back from how we're socialized from a very young age. And if people have these very strong gender schemas that they're aware of, and this is how a woman should behave, and this is how a man should behave, and I'm doing that in kind of quotations, then anything that deviates from that behavior is going to create a reaction.
Right.
So I'd say in terms of countering to that, the approach that I take is really trying to normalize negotiation and to educate people and show them why women are less likely to negotiate. And if you're a manager, why you should be making sure when you're distributing opportunities for development, when you're distributing promotions,
Mm-hmm.
you're very aware that you're distributing it on the base of who the most competent person is as opposed to who's the person that's asking for it, because the person that asks might just be the person that feels overly confident, but they might not necessarily have that competence. So it's a kind of two-forked approach of encouraging people to ask, but also making sure managers are aware just because someone doesn't ask doesn't mean they're less competent.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, no, I completely I picked up on the fact that like LaunchNet, does it help the third party as well in terms of education and saying that okay, so like, just because it's a woman doesn't necessarily mean that you offer like a lower salary than a man. So is that like something what the LaunchNet does as well?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, it's about, engaging and empowering and educating. Those are the three principles that we're founded upon. And,
Mhm.
for me, a huge part of getting people to feel comfortable with negotiation is just normalizing it. So
Right.
we recognize that if someone's asking for a salary increase, if they're asking for that opportunity, they're not greedy and they're not materialistic and they're not these things that our mind might go to.
Hmm.
Instead, they're ambitious and they're looking for that next opportunity and they're looking for continuous development. And it's really recognizing these signs and making sure that the way that we're evaluating them, whether it's a woman or a man saying them,
Hmm.
we're not bringing gender into the equation.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I completely agree with you too. Just because the best way to remove a stigma is by normalizing it, right?
Exactly.
So like just getting it accepted out in the society is the best way for us to remove the stigma altogether. So Donna, I'm really curious because Launch Neg is a really I don't even think it fits. I mean, it's such a unique company that you've created. I was just wondering what got you into creating this company and took it as far as it has come today.
Oh, thank you. I think for me, really, it's recognizing that it took me over a decade to see myself as a negotiator. And, you know, it's recognizing how much potential we all have if we can actually believe in ourselves, if we can see this ability that we have. And, you know, I wish I'd discovered it a decade earlier. I wish I'd discovered it. I won't give away my age, but, you know, at your age, I wish I'd have discovered that I have this power, I have this ability to negotiate. And for me, that's really what I'm creating with Launch, is reaching out to organizations that are focused on empowering women, that are focused on empowering different communities to see just how brilliant they are.
Right.
And really, you know, addressing a lot of the common concerns such as imposter syndrome, and showing that we all have this hesitation and discomfort when we think of advocating for ourselves. That's completely normal, but also emphasizing why it's so important that we still do negotiate, because, you know, for gender pay gap, for the opportunities that we deserve, and also that we empower other people to negotiate, other people that we care about. You know, one of the things I commonly say to people is, if someone's going for a job that you know, don't ask, are you going to negotiate? Ask them, how are you going to negotiate? And be that person that can be there for them and say, do you want to do a role play? I'll play the manager, or I can play you, and we can rehearse how you're going to outline your salary expectations, how you're going to get across what your learning and development focus is for this role.
Yeah, no, that's really inspiring, just because, you know, like just by role play and, you know, like you said, right? Like at home conversations really helps you prepare for the corporate world or beyond in just terms of negotiation.
Exactly, exactly. And it's, you know, again, it's breaking these stereotypes that we have and realizing that if, when you close your eyes and you think of a negotiator, whatever image comes to mind, if you get horrible feelings in your stomach, it's recognizing, okay, that's the stereotype. How can I rewrite the story and redefine negotiation as it applies in my life right now? The roles that I hold as a daughter, as a sister, as a granddaughter, as a leader, how can I use negotiation to empower myself and also the other people around me? And there really are kind of countless opportunities that you can negotiate. Some will be very low stakes, but again, if you can get yourself comfortable with feeling uncomfortable in
Right.
terms of negotiation, then suddenly when you go for these really high stakes conversations, it'll feel a lot more natural, and you'll have had all this experience that you can build upon.
Wow, yeah, no, definitely. I was just wondering, so how does a day-to-day operation looks like it looks at like at LaunchNeg?
Oh, great question. I'm not sure I've had that one before. For me, it's a lot of outreach. So at the moment, I'm partnering with a lot of incredible organizations like TEDx Youth, and really, you know, focused, you know, because I still am in the early stages of launch negotiation, of reaching out to other organizations that really have this passion to empower their employees, that have this passion to empower their leaders.
Hmm.
And, you know, for me, there's no age that is too soon. There's no age that's too old. As anyone that comes in front of me, I can show them they're a negotiator. We just have to break it down to how they can use negotiation in their life.
Hmm.
And the moment you can view it applicable in terms of on a day-to-day basis, the moment you can begin to embrace it. So day to day, it's really a lot of conversations similar to this, a lot of conversations on podcasts, and really trying to get that message out there that regardless of who you are, how old you are, what country you're in, what industry you're in, you are a negotiator, even if you don't realize it, and you can embrace negotiation in your life to get the life that you deserve.
Wow, yeah, no, that's amazing what you guys are doing. Just because I know that like during the COVID times we're all virtual, but I think like you guys have like your companies used all those resources in a way to still continue to educate and empower the audience in a way to break the stigma, which is really amazing, Donna.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, it's phenomenal for me because what I've been able to achieve during COVID is there's been a lot of more virtual engagements. And so it's really enriched a lot of my curriculum, because now I've had the opportunity to hold workshops in, you know, in India, in Pakistan, in Jordan, in all these incredible places around the world that previously wouldn't have been on my radar this early on. And so it's allowed me to really recognize, okay, what are the cultural differences in these different countries that might have contributed to additional stigmas or might present additional barriers to people seeing themselves as negotiators, and then making sure that we're acknowledging that in these types of conversations.
Yeah, no, that's I didn't know that like you guys want to have like because of the it's awesome that like because you're using the virtual platform as a way to go international, and I know that countries like India, Pakistan, you know, even in Asian countries, European countries, each country has its own stigma, and actually kind of builds on that stigma. So in a way that LaunchNeg is trying to break all together, which is really this is I think your mission I think is like going the right way. So like so
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
so I had another, sorry, I have one more question. So, when we last talked, so you talked about how like before COVID, the way you used to hold these workshops was through corporate sponsorships. So
Yes.
maybe elaborate on that and saying like how does that work exactly?
Sure, sure. So I partner with a lot of corporations around the world who are
Mhm.
looking to provide this type of training to basically people, whether it's their employees, whether it's their local community. And really, the emphasis for me is when I run my workshops, I tag in coaching to them because I like to hold people accountable. So I like to make sure that when I'm saying you're a negotiator, when I'm asking you to identify, say, 25 opportunities to negotiate right here, right now, that I will hold you accountable for bringing those to fruition. And so when I work with corporate sponsors, it's a very in-depth sponsorship that focuses on training all the way from negotiating, whether over the remote control, all the way to salary negotiations. So a really in-depth overview of how you can use negotiation, and really heavily role play based, so that people have the opportunity to practice
Mhm.
how they can negotiate, and also recognize, oh, I didn't realize that, when I'm nervous, I start to lick my lips incessantly, or when I'm nervous, I start to click my pen, and start to be aware of these things that we might not otherwise realize until we're in those situations, so that you can control them and make sure that when you do negotiate, when you're going for these really high stakes conversations, you can maintain your composure and put your best foot forward.
Wow, yeah. Speaking on the high stakes conversations, apart from salary negotiation, can you give us like other examples on where like high stakes negotiation happens in general? So,
Absolutely. So it could be a research project if you're getting funding,
mhm,
and that could be a high stakes conversation in terms of what type of resources a university or a school might be able to offer you on this project.
mhm,
If you're volunteering and you're raising sponsorship for your organization, that could be a high stakes conversation in terms of reaching out with local companies and trying to get that sponsorship and seeing what you can offer them in exchange, all the way through to house negotiations when you're buying your first house.
mhm,
Really, the way I define high stakes conversations is if it's going to have a high impact on your life. And the reason I emphasize salary negotiations
mhm,
is, even if salary isn't the most important component of your remuneration package,
mhm.
often our salary is attached to the opportunities that we have at the organization. So when your salary reaches a certain level, then you're eligible for certain promotions and certain positions.
Mhm.
So I encourage people, even if salary isn't a driver for you, still negotiate, because there's other aspects in those conversations where you can bring in learning and development opportunities, you can bring in eligibility for promotion, you can bring in healthcare and dental, all these other components.
Mhm.
But also it means that, that extra pay increase you can put straight to charity or to an organization that you care about, but you're going to be able to continue that professional development. But yeah, high stakes, for some people, a high stakes conversation might be a conversation with their roommate or with their family or with their partner to get their support in the direction they're going. It really depends on where you are in your life, but negotiation will help you get there, because at the end of the day, negotiation, it's not about this arm wrestle. It's about having a conversation that's collaborative and drives sustainable value for both parties involved.
Wow, yeah, no. So it's yeah, I think that's really cool just like saying that because on going back to the research project one, that's something like a lot of college students face as well in terms
Yeah.
of going abroad to get funding or just their dissertations or something like that. So I think this is a really good example where like just active listening and basic conversational skills can really get them what they want. So
Yeah.
one last question, Donna. So so if I, as a like a person who's watching this live and the viewers after this live as well, how can one reach launch negotiation?
Please reach out to me. I would love to hear from anyone that's been on this live. So you can reach me on Instagram, so at launchneg. You can also go to my website, launchnegotiation.com. I very much welcome anyone to reach out. I always like hearing people's unique stories, and if there's anything I can do to empower you, I would be honored.
So is there any upcoming virtual programs that you guys are going to start, or is it already upcoming?
That, yeah, we constantly do. So I'd say reach out to me directly if there's anything specifically you're looking for. I have pre-recorded webinars on salary negotiations. I can also give some guidance if it's research projects or anything like that. Again, it depends on your individual situation, but I have loads of resources on my website, so go head to there, and we always have new events coming up.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Donna. So we have a couple questions from our viewers.
Fantastic.
Um, so Um, one of our viewers were asking, so as a high school, so in my high school, we do senior internships and
Mhm.
or just internships in general. So how can one negotiate in a situation like that? Being a high schooler, so because I face like stigma where like you're a 16-year-old, so stay at your level. So how can one like in an internship situation, how can one negotiate?
Yeah, I love this question because often, even when we have so much power, we don't realize we do. So, even for an internship, it's such a competitive world nowadays. It's likely that hundreds, if not thousands, of people have also gone for that internship. So, if they've chosen you, that means that you've got something to offer them. You've got this star quality, whether it's your personality, whether it's your experience, something unique about you is drawing them into bringing you for that internship. So, you have huge scope to negotiate. So it's really thinking about what's most important for you. Maybe it's the salary and making sure you're getting paid.
Mhm.
Maybe it's making sure that on that internship you get to the opportunity to get the exposure to other departments, to other projects, so that you can add that to your resume, which will really help you for your next career move.
Right.
Maybe it's making sure that you get a reference on LinkedIn or a recommendation. So again, when you're going back at a later stage, or when you're trying to find your next career move, you've got that person that's willing to say they were absolutely fantastic and this is what they're involved in.
Mhm.
So even at that young age, even if it's your very first internship, there are opportunities there for you. It's about thinking, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years time, and what type of responsibilities do I want from this internship? What type of experience do I want that I can then leverage for my next position and carry on towards that 3 to 5 year goal that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah. So, in a situation like this, what would be a good like conversation starter for us to get the ball rolling? So,
So I'd recommend open questions as much as you
mhm.
can. So I would say ahead of going into that conversation, do a bit of planning. So think about, what are you trying to get from this internship? What are you trying to get from this conversation? And then that will unlock certain bits of information that you'll need to find out during that conversation to be able to progress it. So think about how you can use open communication. So your how questions, your what questions.
Right.
And when you're presenting these questions, don't feel the need to immediately provide clarification or second guess yourself. Just present the question as clearly and confidently as you can,
Hmm.
and then allow the silence, if there is any. Sit with that silence and let the other person work their way through that answer.
Right.
Again, you can have qualifying questions if they don't quite give you the answer that you want, you can follow up. But really, from these conversations, you're looking like a detective to get as much information about the other person's mindset as you can.
Hmm.
And you can do research online, you can try and investigate it ahead of that conversation. But the best way to do it is to ask them these open questions that are going to get you the answers that you need
Hmm.
in order to then best position yourself. So again, if it's a salary conversation, you can ask the question in terms of what's the salary range for this role,
Right.
and how can we progress more towards this type of salary. So questions that are really getting you the information that you need.
Mhm.
And then the importance of getting that salary expectation, getting that salary range is, say if you're expecting to be paid $20 an hour and they say it's $25 to $30 an hour, then suddenly you're going to make sure that when you go back to them, you're going to say, well, the other positions I was looking, that I've seen in the market are around $30 an hour. How can we progress this to get to that level? You're not going to go back to that $20 that you previously had in mind. You're adjusting it based on the information you get so that you're not underselling yourself in that situation.
So in a situation where like I do negotiate, I present my questions and I get shut down or rejected, what does one like continue to follow up, or do you give up at one point?
Never give up. What I would say is, again, pay attention to the body language. Why do you think they might be shutting down these answers? Is it, it could be at the moment, especially where everything's virtually, they could be distracted. They could have a number of different things that they're juggling in terms of priorities.
Hmm.
Maybe the questions genuinely caught them off guard and they don't have the answer and they're trying to save face. So they're just shutting you down so that they can come back at a later stage.
Hmm.
So I think what I'd do is prepare ahead of the conversation. Okay, if they shut this down, what's a different way that I can ask that question? Or how we can naturally revisit that question that's not going to cause additional conflict or friction. And then if you get to a point where you're just not getting that information from them, you can state in terms of the difficulty you're having, and it doesn't have to be overly aggressive, but you can say, one thing that I'd really like to learn more about is this. How can we progress this conversation forward? And again, give them the opportunity to cultivate the answer and the solution. And again, when people come up with the answer themselves, they very much like it and they're more likely to stick to it because it's their own idea. So if you can say something, something I'm really passionate about learning about, how can we progress this conversation? they will be able to say, you know what, now's not a great time. How about next week? Or how about in, 30 minutes time, I call you back once I've, managed to take my dog for a walk and they're no longer chewing my ankle, those types of conversations. So definitely don't give up. Even in a negotiation, if you don't get what you desired to achieve, reflect upon the negotiation, what you can do differently next time, but also take time to pat yourself in the back for the fact that you had the courage to negotiate, because so often it's that fear of negotiation that holds us back from asking for what we want.
Hmm.
So, it's really important that you just face that fear and negotiate, regardless of what stage you're in your career, regardless of whether you think they're going to be able to offer you it or not. Just make sure that you're approaching the conversation professionally, that you've done your preparation ahead of it. And again, you're leveraging emotional intelligence, active listening, open communication, and empathy to really increase your influence in that conversation.
Wow, thank you so much, Donna. So that concludes our time for today. But I learned a lot. Like, I mean, just because I learned a lot from our call, but this just a whole, I learned so much more. And I'm definitely, I know, like, just like myself, a lot of our viewers are going to continue with the advice that you've given. And thank you so much. Your LaunchNag is an inspiring company. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And likewise, TEDx Youth, it's an honor to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Have a nice day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.